Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining today's webinar on the introduction to Neuro Ideation. We're going to wait just a few seconds to let everybody join us from the waiting room. So thank you for your patience. So we're all coming in from the waiting room right now. We're just going to wait a few more seconds to make sure that everybody who's signed up for this webinar is joining us. Okay, I think we'll just get started then. So good morning and afternoon and evening, depending on where you are in the world right now. Thank you so much again, and I'd just like to welcome everybody to this presentation on neuroideation, including those who are managing ideation and innovation with BlueCallom, and also a warm welcome to those who are joining us through the World Innovations Forum, which is a foundation established by BlueCallom's founders. My name is Cleo Dan, and I'm on the product team here at BlueCallom. So the webinar content will get started shortly, but first I'd like to run through some quick housekeeping items. So there's no need to take screenshots since we will be recording this webinar and making it available to you in the next few days. And secondly, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please post them in the Zoom Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our panelist, Axel Schulze. Axel is founder and CEO of the BlueCallom Group and chairman of the World Innovations Forum Foundation. Axel started and successfully exited 4 companies, the biggest reaching 5 billion in revenue and the second close to 1 billion. Axel is a published author and patent holder. In 2015, listed in the Global 100 Most Influential Startup Accelerators. In 2008, he won the San Francisco Entrepreneur Award. In 2006, he chaired the SaaS Channel Committee at SIIA, the leading trade association for the software industry in the US. He was also an early advisor at LinkedIn in 2003 and spent the majority of his business life in Silicon Valley. Most recently, Axel has been on a quest to discover how the brain creates and processes ideas and how some ideas can disrupt an entire industry. And we're going to be learning more about that today. So without further ado, Axel, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Cleo. And yeah, also from my side, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to our Neuro Ideation webinar. So it's actually the first time that we open the box, so to speak, and talk about our methodology, which we believe has actually changed our, at least from our team, the entire thinking about how actually innovation works and how ideas get composed. And that is what we want to share with you. So also from my side, greetings to our guests from the World Innovations Forum, which is our foundation and where we help startups and companies, not only in the developed world, but also in the emerging countries to get up to speed. And our vision there is that one day we will basically all be on the same level. Now, when we start about, innovation, then we have mostly 2 things in mind. One is startups disrupting the world, and the other is corporate enterprises who kind of supposed to do that too, but somehow don't get really to the real point of disruption. There's amazing little new ideas, there's amazing improvements, but not groundbreaking innovation. I mean, groundbreaking meaning really, something totally new that changes the behavior or changes security or changes the entire, industry's way of doing business. And when we talk to enterprise executives who want to be more innovative and tell their teams we want to be more innovative, there are a couple key questions, and these I want to share with you because we're trying to address that. And some of these questions actually also were a big driver for what we do today. So one is, what can we do to get our team more creative, more entrepreneurial, and more innovative? And it was interesting for me to see that particularly the middle part, the entrepreneurial, was one of the biggest drivers for that question. Also for the interview with me saying, okay, this is what we want to know. Now, and my instinct said, well, entrepreneurial, that is a different beast, because if you are an entrepreneurial person, then you start your own company. But I also realized when looking to entrepreneurial people who did not start their company, for what reason they didn't start the company, and are still creative and entrepreneurial and innovative. And most of them just didn't want to take this enormous risk that entrepreneurs do, but they are still risky enough for an enterprise to actually change the world. So that was an interesting aspect, because those are actually critical for innovation teams. The other thing was, is there a way to predict where our disruptors come from and what kind of early warning systems could we build? And this was driven across the world. There was one large automobile parts manufacturer in Japan, another large global electric parts enterprise in Japan. There were companies even in Silicon Valley. I mean, not the typical Silicon Valley tech companies, but Silicon Valley companies. There are companies in Europe, in Latin America, Southeast Asia. And I was a little bit astounded by the intense need for an early warning system so that they know when somebody pops up. And I was astounded because in my life, it never occurred to me that this would even be an interesting thing. So theoretically, we could probably try to build something, but the reason why this is so interesting for enterprises is because they fear the competition from startups more than anything else. And the reason why they fear it is because their own organization is structured in a way that they almost cannot follow their customers' needs on a day-by-day basis. They do their surveys, they do their questionnaires and so on, but we realize that most people don't really know what their customers actually want. And they definitely do not know what they're dreaming about. And these two issues, you will see, is something that we will need to find out very, very quickly before we even start making an idea. And then there was having the top-notch engineers, and still we don't disrupt innovation. Why? And this is another thing that has to do with where ideas actually come from, and realizing that if you have one engineer or 100, you have only more of the same. But now we will learn where ideas are coming from, and you will see that this is actually one of the big challenges to completely change in every single innovation center, even in the R&D centers. Now, let's talk about where we want to go to. So the underlying questions actually lead to something that was very interesting for us. What do we know about techniques to create innovation, innovative thinking? How does this actually work? And can we influence the ideation process? Because we know the brain is the origin of the idea, but we don't know how it does, what the brain does to make actually an idea. So how is the brain actually creating and composing ideas? That was the ultimate question that nobody could answer. We were researching the internet upside down, inside out, from left to right, and from top to bottom. There was no clear answer. And the only answer that we realized is out there is we don't know. It's probably basically accidental. It's all of a sudden. It comes out of nowhere, out of the blue, and so forth. And that was something I personally did not want to accept. I mean, nature is such a interestingly organized thing. And we know, and maybe you have read this book, The Butterfly Effect. Maybe you have researched, how accidental things occur, and that there is no real accidental behavior. You throw out a penny out of an airplane in 10,000 feet or 10,000 meter, doesn't matter height. And a computer could theoretically, if they understand every layer of the air, could calculate whether it's landing on the flip side or on the other side, and even if it would stand on its corner. But the brain is equally complex, probably far complexer than this calculation. So can we finally realize how it works? And this is what we're looking at, because we did not know and nobody else knew. And we were looking into what did athletes do in the last 50 to 70 years that made an amazing transformation. And we learned while doing that analogous research is something that the brain loves to do. It's fascinating. And so we wanted to fascinate our brain. Now here we see a mountain climber in the 1950s. Takes 7 days to 10 days, up Half Dome. California people amongst you know where Half Dome is, this beautiful mountain in Yosemite National Park. And so we're looking at the past 50 years. It took a little bit longer than 10 days, but not much longer. But now it takes 2 hours and 20 minutes. So what has happened that within 50 years, our body or something made this possible? Obviously gear, yes, but it's still ropes, it's still hooks, but there's something else that worked out. The skier in the 50s, obviously the gear that they're using was quite different than we have today, but still, just the way, the body lies, down. If you go back, upright, and basically it looks like it's just falling apart, so to speak. But no, it isn't. Totally balanced, totally cool looking, driving his game down the hill. I always said this is one of my favorites. The motorbike artist in the 50s, 1950s, balancing on the car, on the motorbike while it's running. But now look at today. Speechless, this is such an amazing act. And the question is, how could a transformation like that be possible? It could not be biological evolution, not in 50 years. Equipment, yes, but is it equipment when you just basically, fly around on your motorbike? To some part, of course, but it's not all of it. And if you remember the guys who are climbing up Half Dome, partially the equipment, but it's not all of it. And so we find out that top athletes today know their bodies so much better than just 50 years ago. And some people say they know it far better than even any doctor knew it 50 years ago. They can train the single muscle. They know exactly their nutrition need, their consumption of energy and everything. And so that drove us to think we need to rethink innovation at its core. And that's up here in our mind. If we don't know how this works, we could not train, we could not stimulate, we cannot do anything. We can't even build better tools because we don't know how it works. We wouldn't even know what kind of tools we need. If we need to drill a hole in stone, we need to know what we drill and what the stone is about and how deep it goes and what it needs to go in there. If we don't understand, we can just kill the stone, but we can't drill a hole in it. And so we came to the realization, not by asking all the other peers that we did before, couldn't get a better answer than, think out of the box and think big and think bold and so forth. We actually started on the neuroscience side. And from neuroscientists, we found out how the brain is actually learning. And from one neuroscientist, Dr. David Eagleman from Stanford University, we realized that because he was trying also to find out, how do we actually help the brain when it's damaged and help, brain injuries and so on. And he realized that the brain's function of learning and ideation, and that was the key for us. is actually suppressed when the external impressions from the outside fail or cannot be absorbed. And so his position was actually there is no creation inside, but the brain actually consumes experience from the outside and then composes it to new. And if that misses, there is no creativity. We have a thing, and I've talked a bit in the 2 slides, that is called corpus callosum, that connects our 2 brain halves. And we have people that are born without the corpus callosum, and they're not creative at all. There's no creativity. And to the contrary, even though Albert Einstein didn't really want to have his brain open up, but at the end, for whatever reason, people did. And they found out that his corpus callosum was way more extended and expanded than for most other people. So we can say today that our brain does not do any idea by accident. All the ideas coming from past experiences. So this is sort of a scientific fact. And now for us, it was amazing to realize, because if we can turn it around, if everything that we think comes from past experiences, we can control this path. We can actually try to get more experiences, different experiences, to get more creative. And if we ask the most creative people or observe where they come from, what they did, we realize all the same thing. There are people who traveled a lot, did a lot of different things and basically enriched their set of experiences. But something else was very cool. I'm kind of love to turn things upside down. What happened if not? And I realized that when everything comes from past experiences, then the idea we have, any idea, because we cannot create new things, every idea we have coming from past experiences means it's built from existing things that we experienced before. And that means every idea we come up with, we compose, is actually a possibility to realize. Because if there is no past experience with anything, we will not be able to make any creation out of it. We will not be able to innovate with things that didn't happen, we haven't seen, heard, experienced, felt, and so forth. On my TED Talk, I did a little exercise with the audience. Create something out of lexicrypt and a platypus. So most people didn't know either one. Some people knew that the platypus is an animal, but nobody knew what lexicrypt is. Could not know and could not do anything with it. Completely stuck. Impossible to innovate something with or around lexicrypt. If you never had experience with lexicrypt, you cannot add something that has to do, even in the furthest distance, has an impact from lexicrypt, until you know or you learned that lexicrypt doesn't exist even. So theoretically, you could have invented anything around it, because since it doesn't exist, you can do anything you want. But your brain doesn't even then allow to do anything with it or without it. And so it was very clear how ideas got created. Now, we have a huge, powerful brain with lots and lots and lots of these neurons, 86 billion. And each of these golden capsules that you see on the screen represents basically a neuron cell, the so-called organelle. And this is a little computer. It's probably as powerful as your laptop. And with 86 billion, you can only furthest imagine what kind of power we carry with us. Now, I don't want to go through all this because you can read it if you're interested. But what I'm saying is, if we can compose new ideas from past experiences, and this is done in the typical electrochemical way, how our brain works, our neuron networks, and how the brain and the neurons are actually connected with each other. And we also know that we can most likely understand what stimulates the brain to do that and what frustrates the brain, or actually let the brain, not do it. Because the second one is very critical, as we found out in our research. So one more piece about our little thing up there, 3 pounds, everybody has it, 86 billion, everybody has it. Organelles that actually work through these neurons. And we have this, what I mentioned earlier, this corpus callosum that, as you can see here, connects the left and the right brain half with 200 million axons, fibers, basically nerves between one and the other half. And it has it because the one part of the brain, even though there are a lot of brain surgeons who say, no, this is not creative and logical, it's something else. It is actually maybe not true, but we know for a fact that this mechanic, when we play with it, is actually the one that helps us get creative ideas. And if it's not there, we don't. And it negotiates, and it does something else, because the brain takes more energy than any other organ in our body. It's the most energy consuming thing. I mean, you can run up Half Dome, but you can also sit and think about how our brain works, and most likely you have the same energy consumption. Seems unbelievable, right? But the brain knows that if it does too much, it actually flips. So the energy consumption would be too much, and if you stress your brain too much, you actually fall asleep. And many people, at least I had this too, if you do too much, you get so exhausted that you just collapse and sleep. So the brain has this protection mechanism. And it's important to understand that it does it, because when we go to ideation and we want to get to groundbreaking innovation, I mean, disruptive models that changes everything, the complexity of the brain process to get there is higher than it could do in one session. It cannot, because the energy to look for all the related and unrelated experiences of these 86 billion neurons would take more energy and more time than it can actually absorb in one session. And so if we know that this is the fact, then we also know that an hour brainstorming, never ever gets you to groundbreaking innovation, even though it's fun and you get new ideas. But they're the so-called obvious ideas, and we'll talk about this in a second. So experiences is the innovation silver. It's all about experiences, because our ideas are composed of experiences. And that's the only source a new idea can be created. Past experiences. Lexicrypt, no new idea. With Lexicrypt, yes, no idea. So that means experiences is of strategic importance. It's the food for brain, the food for thought. And so if we're looking for groundbreaking innovation, obviously one question is, who do we innovate for? Of course, for our customers, for our market. Who has the best experience with all the pain points and all the problems, countless problems in this industry? Our customer. If we don't take our customer into the innovation project, we most likely have zero chance. Maybe it's 0.001%, but it's so minimal that we don't need to talk about. And if we now look why enterprises versus startups, fundamental difference in their innovation attempt, fundamental difference in the output. Have you ever seen a global enterprise coming with a completely disruptive model like a Tesla or like an Airbnb or like Salesforce.com or ... any of them? No, not a single one. There is no radical innovation out of these larger companies. And number one reason, they don't want to have the customer early on in their innovation project, because they don't even know what the outcome is, and they don't want to know the customer, the competitor, what they do. So the fear for somebody stealing an idea, which is a total different thing, and nobody can steal a disruptive idea, but the fear for stealing the idea is bigger than the objective of having groundbreaking innovation. And there's one concept, it's called open innovation. And open because if you take all inputs in from around the world, becomes now a fundamentally different value proposition. Because it isn't only about, would it be nice to take your customers in? Yeah, it would be nice, but we cannot do because we're a public company and we have all the regulations and blah, 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 and therefore we cannot. Well, if you cannot, that's a decision to be made. We do not take customers in our ideation process, and we will not innovate. It's funny, isn't it? Because this experience set is needed to get to innovation. Because now, since we understand how ideas get actually composed from experiences, and if we don't have them, we cannot. On the startup side, all of them, all of my peers, all of the guys I know, not just Silicon Valley, but Europe, Southeast Asia, and more, have no chance to even start without getting deep dive into their potential customers. Now you may say, yeah, of course, they're not a public company, they can do that. But it doesn't help you. I mean, today, Tesla, about 12 years after they got founded, or even more, I don't know, but today there are 300 billion in valuation. Mercedes-Benz is 40. I mean, the same investors and the same rules and regulations that brought them there is now killing it. It's rules and regulations. It's not mind, it's not intelligence, it's not even money, it's rules and regulations. So we need to help enterprises not only to understand how our machine brain works and how we get to ideas, but also because we now understand, what do we do with it? Because if rules and regulation would prevent them to speak to customers because somebody says, well, if you do, you need to make a public statement because some of the investors would say, well, you did something that we didn't know, and therefore some investors who might be in the circle of the innovation would be, and so forth. I mean, it's very simple. Yeah, make a public statement. But then the fear sets in. No, we cannot do it. We don't know, blah, 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 and so forth. You know how it is. And so ideation, as you can already feel, changes everything. As long as it was just experimentation, was easy. As long as it was just experimentation with experts, it was easy. But now ideation becomes an understood element of the whole innovation process. And actually the core element, even though the idea that is created through ideation itself is of no value in that very moment where it's there. It becomes of value when you bring it to market and embrace it in the market. But still, without the seed, without the initial spark, all the other things are lame and don't work. And we've seen it over and over and over again. So we talked about brainstorming being sort of just a starting point, and the brain would not come up with disruptive ideas from brainstorming, but it is a starting point. What we get is obvious ideas. We cannot get disruptive innovation from brainstorming. We talked about a little bit earlier when I said, the brain would consume far too much energy to do this in one of these sessions, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, even you do 3 of them once after the other. But it's a good starting point, and it's also good to understand that these obvious ideas where everybody is excited after these brainstorm meetings, I mean, I don't know how many I did in my life. It is always cool, but it never basically produced an outstanding idea. It always was good, a lot of inputs. And if we do more of them, even more inputs, but not groundbreaking ideas, never. Also, I mean, if you look at Oracle, the database they developed 30 years ago or even more, it's still the one product. The first product the first concept we created at Computer 2000, that was a disruptive business model, but that was the only true innovation we did for the rest of the lifetime of the company. Then later on at Infinigate, we actually wanted to go fundraising, and we created a digital stock exchange in 1997 until the authorities asked us to shut it down. But we had even other companies on that digital stock exchange, and we had basically a digital market maker. So it was all completely digital. People could trade. Stock price went up and went down. But this was the only invention, so to speak, in that moment in this business that we sold later on. And in Infinigate itself, there was only one moment where we said, okay, we will be a fundamentally different distribution organization. At Blue Roads later on, a software company in Silicon Valley, the concept was, you know, the lead distribution would be a pull methodology versus a push. We don't push out leads anymore. We actually let resellers pull it from a database from our website. Phenomenal. We basically eliminated all the competitors in the market and became market leader, even though in the beginning nobody said, nobody believed us to be even, you know, alive 6 months after we started. We couldn't get funding because this was just too crazy. And but that was the only innovative idea, because in all these cases they were kind of accidental. And I did not know, myself did not know, how can I create a second one? Excuse me. And so I began to understand that these ideas, these magical ideas, they pop, and then you build your company, and then you focus to make it successful. Execution, execution, execution. And that's a good thing. But once this time is over, I mean, after probably 10 to 15 years, you struggle reinventing yourself. And that was one big deal for me before these questions popped up, how our brain works. But when this came up, I realized, okay, the impact of understanding how the brain actually creates ideas will actually change the entire surface of innovation. So we realized another thing. On brainstorming, you probably experienced this yourself. I'm sure everybody had a brainstorming session in their lives. So once you're done with brainstorming, everybody's happy and goes on. And the manager or whoever moderated the process is actually putting the most important ideas together. You voted on it with your stickers and so forth, and then committed to work on it. A day later or 2 days later, 50%, sometimes even 80% come with better ideas that they had on the brainstorm meeting. But what's happening is they get turned down. You know, people said, no, come on. I mean, we had our meeting. We cannot, you know, come back with new ideas. I mean, we will never be finished. So let's start with that. And then we see, you know, and if somebody's nice, you know, make a note of it. It seems to be a very important idea. Thank you very much, but thanks, no thanks. And so these ideas get turned down. However, and this is what we learned when we analyzed that process, that the brain continues to work on the ideas, because the brain also thinks, maybe there is more. But because of its energy consuming process, and also the prevention of, you know, falling asleep or overheating, so to speak, shuts it down, but comes back. You certainly have the experience, or had the experience, that during the night, if you're very, how to say it, engaged in your business, and you go to bed with a problem, that oftentimes the next morning, either direct after you wake up or an hour or two later, you have a solution, or you get much closer to the solution than you were last night, because the brain actually works on that. And the brain has a function given by nature that works on problems that you have, trying to help you, so to speak, solve it. And the post-brainstorming idea creation is actually more relevant than the idea creation during the brainstorm meeting, but we turn it all down and we select 3 instead of 100. And so we realized that we need to take post-brainstorming ideas into consideration. And now the number of ideas get so much, not just 3 or 4 or 5 or 7, 10, 30. I mean, you get into the hundreds. You say, gosh, I mean, come on, with 100 ideas, I mean, you know, you get crazy. Well, guess what? This is what these disruptive innovators do. I mean, when we started our first company, C2000, we had 3 months polishing our ideas, constantly new things, new aspects. Yeah, this is cool. Let's see how would it fit? It doesn't fit. Well, maybe we put it on the side. Maybe we don't use it, but maybe we do later on. And a friend of mine who developed basically this chain system between shopping carts, physical shopping carts. It's all over Europe. It's in Australia, in half of Southeast Asia. I think it's some states in Northern America. And so the shopping carts get connected with a chain, and you put a coin in to release it or to get the coin back. Very simple, absolutely simple. These guys had this idea and they realized it's not working because, the plastic was too weak. I mean, thousands of things. So they worked 2 months constantly on the idea how to make it work. They sold about 40 million of these chains every year. And, don't want to even tell you how much money they made. So one of the richest guys with a little chain system for shopping carts. An amazing idea, super simple. But at the end of the day, it didn't work out in the beginning. So the disruptive idea of what they actually did at the end of the day came after 2 months, constantly sitting down. And we're shutting down a brainstorm meeting after 60 minutes. So good learning how now we know how it works, how we do better. I mentioned in the very beginning, and I showed you the analogy between how the sport athletes basically train their body and understand their body compared to 50 years ago, and said, well, this is something we need to do too. This analogous thinking was actually something I also learned is a specialty of our mind. It can go when we sort of help them to do that by saying, let's find some totally different but similar situations. Now I showed here, I think this picture is from an old steel manufacturing place. And if you think about silicon and chips manufacturing, it's probably, you think, well, what does it one to do with the other? And I have to say, I don't know. I just randomly picked that. But maybe there is a relationship. And so what our mind does, and this actually was helping us when we picked the analogy to extreme sports, we know that these guys understood their body much better than any time in human history before. But we also realized, sort of as a side effect, the equipment played a major role, but the equipment was built after the understanding of the body and not vice versa. The trainer understood the body and could help train it far better than any time before. So we realized that when we have an understanding of creating ideas, we also need to probably consider tools. We rejected this idea in the beginning because we thought, no, maybe we, from our only tool is probably a paper canvas, and we will figure it out and good. And we realized the idea of how to find ideas bared one thing: hundreds and thousands of idea snippets that were too much for anybody to absorb and consume and sort, and it was just overwhelming. So we thought, okay, we need a computer to do that. And so this was actually why we created an application, a software for our platform. Not because we thought it's cool to build a software. Honestly, I've done so many that I didn't really want it, but it wouldn't work without it. And the analogy to the sports world helped me a lot that, yeah, it was there too. And also when we begin to teach our methodologies, it became very obvious that we need to also have trainers to understand that and train people to do that. So we're working here with a local university, building the trainer program, a trainings program, and so forth, and then looking for training companies around the world to help do that. But analogy experiences has another side effect or brings something with it. Actually, our mind controls whether the analogy is a good fit or not. And it took me a while until I realized how it does actually sort of signal a misfit, because I couldn't see that the brain kind of gives me the idea that this is probably a misfit. But what the brain does, it actually blocks further basically thinking. It makes it harder. It ejects sort of like, hey, wait a minute, there's something wrong, but you don't sense this really. And then you ignore it. And we do this often in our lives. We think, when we hire this person, really, the paper looked good. And, yeah, this would work. Something here says, maybe not really, but you ignore it. And if you do this mistake in a too deep sense, really wrong, you know what happens? You feel it in your gut. You feel it physically that something is wrong. And I just learned this actually about 4, 5, 6, 7 months ago. There is a whole chain of neurons directly connecting the gut with the brain with only one function: sense sort of actually illnesses. That was the pathology answer. But we also realized this must be the same thing, because in this case it's not an illness, but it's a misconception that our idea that it was formed by the brain and we still understand what's in there, which is something that that relationship we don't understand yet. But we understood that there is a signal from misconception. And this is on analogous experiences. So if there's a misconception, you will feel it when you carefully, watch your body. But if it don't, it brings up yet another big amount of new ideas from deeper lying experiences. And so what happened is actually there's a staggering of experience analysis. The first is on the brainstorming, then it's on the post-brainstorm experience, then it comes the analogous. There's a post-analogous experience. So it's when you thought through it and you have theoretically your results, to go again through this in about 48 hours. And this is also where, during that time, where the conflict of, is this really a good analogy or not, is coming in. And again, sometimes this sounds a little bit weird, but if you're not trusting me, which I wouldn't really, be any kind of offended, get a little bit into neuroscience. It's a fascinating area in itself. And I believe what we learned in the last 4 years, this will change our whole humanity, probably more than all technology so far. So, and the last session is basically what we call column burst. And this is a session where it connects a little bit to what I said in the early beginning. These entrepreneurial thinker, even though they are not building their own company, but they have that entrepreneurial spirit. These guys are typically people, men, women, doesn't matter, who have an interest in looking into the future. What will the future bring? Will that be possible? They like usually sci-fi movies and stuff like that. They like futuristic concepts. And if we take the column burst as a kind of third level of brainstorming, but not brainstorming for an idea or brainstorming for a solution, but brainstorming for how would the solution that we already created look in the future, in 50 or 100 years. And there are people who would say, God, 100 years, you're totally crazy. Nobody knows. It doesn't matter. And this is something else. And this comes, be open-minded. It doesn't matter whether we know or not. But the imagination, how could it look in 100 years, is what counts. And since we have the ability to imagine, this is part of our base function of our mind. Everybody has it. Most people reject it or get trained to not think about it. This is dangerous, this is crazy, you don't do it, live in here and now, and this is the only way to survive, and yada, yada, yada. But those who like that are great minds to actually take the construct that we have developed so far and try to implement this in the next 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years. We want to achieve what we call the inability of build it, the impossibility factor of our idea. Can we find a point in time where this might work? Or the other way around, can we find a situation where this might be, in 100 years, this might be cool, but today is impossible to build? And you will find situations with your new product idea that you get to this situation. And I can say, you know, I did it all the time. And you may say, yeah, actually, you're a different guy. I mean, I don't care. I cannot. Everybody I talked to could. I mean, the guy with the chain, you know, when they started and what he told me about where this can go, just amazing. If you watch one of the early videos from Travis, when he talked about, you know, bringing Uber to life, where it would go, you know, you would have said, you know, this guy is probably mentally ill. You may have the same experience with Elon Musk. This guy's totally crazy. No, I mean, this guy is. You talk to Jeff Bezos, he would look at you with your big eyes and tell you where it goes. And he would say, okay, come on. Okay, guy, you have to learn a lot. But over time, I mean, he is teaching us what we have to learn a lot, all of them. And they have all the same pattern. They have the ability to dream about the future. Now, there's one thing that is critical about it. Isn't about dreaming something which may look different anyway. It is about having an idea what your current idea might look like in the future. And if you like that idea in the future, that concept, which you can, again, compose from past experiences, plus the whole ideation experience, which is an experience in itself, you can basically transport the concept into the next 20 to 50 years. Why is it important? Because you get a vision of what you do today for the future. And that vision, if that manifests in your mind, saying, yeah, this is where we want to go to. And it doesn't matter whether you're a startup or a global enterprise with $150 billion in revenue, or whatever it is. It does not matter. But you have to get to this process, to this peak of the mountain, so to speak, to get the visibility. And that is what this BlueCallom Summit is all about. That's the last step in our methodology. You get to a vision that is unparalleled for the product or the solution that you're building. It is unique. If you put anybody on this peak of this mountain here, Matterhorn, every single person will have a different perspective and a different experience than you have when you stood there, with 100% certainty. There will not be a single human on earth who will have the same experience, even on the same clear night like here on the picture, because their past experiences influence the emotions of this experience. That means your vision, even though it's impossible to build today, will give you an indication where you go. And that vision will be 100%, without any exception, different than if your strongest competitor would do the very same process. And that would mean that two companies all of a sudden start to go in different directions. How cool would that be? If you take the automobile industry, if you take the computer industry, if you take the mobile phone industry, I mean, whatever it is, after 10, 15 years, all the products look alike. And if all products look alike, the margin erosion starts, the pricing go down, and the capability to bring something major new is no longer there because there is not even the budget to do that. Every unicorn, per definition, is $1 billion value. And probably 500 million or more have been invested in a unicorn. In some investments reached 3, 4, 5 billion. I don't know how many companies on earth are existing today who would say 5 billion, no problem. We can invest this overnight. There's no CFO who would say, what is this idea? And what do you want? $3 billion? Are you totally insane? I mean, and this is the reason why they don't build Another reason why they don't build innovative and disruptive products. So I hope I could give you sort of a view into the method of how our brain works and how we use it as a method to actually get these ideas out. None of this is actually new. Everything I told you is basically here since roughly 12,000 years. Once we developed our neocortex about, I think, 300,000 years ago, it took a while. And then 12,000 years ago, when we had our agricultural revolution, we started to use the neocortex more and more and more. And this function is nothing new. But we did not know. That is what's new. The understanding is new. Very much like our sports guys. I mean, humans were climbing mountains for eons. And still was 7 to 10 years to get up Half Dome just 50 years ago. And now in 2 hours 20. I mean, you know, that difference, that is what we're trying to do with BlueCallom and our Neuro Ideation methodology and the product. So with all respect to methodology, we do also try to be, you know, upfront, even though we're the first in this space, but we're trying to be upfront, extremely competitive. And we said one thing that we could do, and that would be very hard to compete with, but we invite obviously every competitor, is time to innovate, shrinking it down to 6 weeks. We know for a fact that this is something that every innovation manager in any of the larger company innovation centers told us, totally impossible. I mean, you cannot imagine what we go through. I said, you know, I can imagine, but that doesn't help. I mean, that's the timeline we know is possible because we have done that ourselves. Not methodical, like I explained it today, but by accident and by pressure to go as fast as possible into the market. So the numbers are basically possible. Now the methodology is there, and we have the technology to actually make it happening because we need to guide people through the process. And so as a technology, we choose the Canvas model that most of you probably know. What you probably have never seen is a multi-user canvas, as you can see it here. So there can be theoretically 500 users or more, 10,000 users, and feed ideas. And as you can see, there's stars and there is the thumbs up, and we're working on a couple new things to add this in the next generation in early next year, because we need to obviously find out what is a good idea. And an AI system cannot do that, because an AI system needs to be trained to look for similarities. So you can train it to find a dog out of thousands of animals. You know, but if I do this with my nephew or with my granddaughter, you know, I take a book and show her a dog, and I show her probably 10 times, and she knows this is a dog, and she can show me dogs in every book that we have, and we have lots of books, and obviously in the internet. So our mind is superior over technology still, so that's a good news. But it also is a challenge, because if we produce so many ideas, we need to find out. So AI cannot, and if we have 500 people doing the things, we need the 500 people to also select what they find it's good. They cannot grind through everything, but they theoretically even randomly grind through certain aspects of the feedback and give between 1 and 5 stars. And we rate the stars from a person based on the reputation of that person, which is something that also needs to be developed over time. So this is in the early days, probably not really, really perfect, but we're having other models and algorithms in the making to find out how we get to best possible ideas. But with that, we can actually grind through tens of thousands of idea snippets. We couldn't do this physically. We couldn't do this with paper. I mean, we had a situation where we had probably, it was about 250 ideas. and we just gave up. We couldn't read and sort and I mean, even with a couple people, I mean, it would have taken days, and then we exhaust by going through this. So it was very difficult. The structure itself is a software as a service. So you can, as soon as it's ready, you can log in. It's $180 per user per month, a very classical software as a service model. So we choose purposely not a disruptive business model, at least not yet. And so we go with what people know, because our thing is radically different anyway. So we don't want to make too many changes. And so BlueCallom Deep, which is the name of the product, handles basically thousands of users. You can run multiple innovation projects at the same time. The Enterprise Edition, as you can see, the dashboard here shows the map, the number of projects, the number of managers, members in the project. Executive sees everything. The VPs or country people see the country level. Then within the country level, there's a director level where you can see their projects all the way down to the individual. And we have ways to aggregate this on the fly. So everything is in real time. So nothing needs a push button saying, okay, consolidate my data. And what I want to leave you with is the understanding of when we understood, the moment we understood the complete impact of how we create and compose ideas and came up with this Neuro Ideation model, we also realized that the entire chain of life cycle of an innovation is actually changing. So one of the key things, if we go back from here, is needs and dreams analysis. So we need to feed our brain basically with the experience of our customer's brain. We talked about that. Now, for us as an innovation team, it is important to have people who are, open-minded. We don't need the naysayer. We don't need the devil's advocate. A devil's advocate in the ideation process is just not necessary. I don't want to say it's bad, but it's not necessary. So that means before we do all that, we actually try to get our dream team assembled. Dream team meaning open-minded, fast thinker, intelligent, can associate a lot of things, have lots of experiences. If we would today put together a dream team, we'd probably look for people who have been traveling the world, maybe playing in a rock band, or extreme sports people. I mean, people with lots of extreme things they did. That would be a good one. Somebody who is a couch potato, probably not so good, and that's something else we're trying to research, how 10,000 hours of TV produces actually experiences itself. So we don't know yet. The other thing then is, in order to strategically develop, because now we know how it works, a product, we don't need sort of experimentation. Yeah, everybody experiments, let your brain flow, play around, and here's the ping pong and here's the football play, and you just take your time. I mean, this is so random that the likelihood there's anything coming out of that is next to zero. So that means if we need a strategy and want a strategy, we need to get one step even further, going to innovation opportunity discovery. And this is going back to our customers and trying to understand what are their pain points, their biggest pain points, and also their biggest dreams. Because a startup may actually ask for the dreams, and they build the dream. And if you don't, it doesn't matter how good you are and how good your innovation and ideation process is. If you don't know where to go, everything is back to the grabs, right? To the contrary, I mean, once you got the idea and you have a disruptive business model, the first thing before you even write a single line of code or put two wheels together for the most primitive prototype, make an idea validation. Go back to your market and say, okay, this is our dream. This is the big vision. And now people who have just fear that somebody steals the idea, which again, nobody can, but that's a different topic. You get from the market the feedback strong enough that this is really, really, really good, or that is somewhat good, but, or I don't really know, or in the worst case, total crap, I don't care. Now, with that feedback, you either stop here, still haven't done a prototype and still wasted money and just a little bit of time, and go back, or you go to your finance person and said, we need the budget for this. And we have asked 50 people, and they're willing actually to pre-order this product as soon as we have it. So, and then you go to the solution building, and there's one unique thing, as you can see here. The solution building starts here, but soon thereafter, you already go into the market with a product that is not even finished. For most societies, an impossibility. Silicon Valley, a day-to-day business. If you join our beta test, you will exactly see what it is. It's a complete incomplete product. So, which means we tell you it's not complete. We tell you it's basically what we call a market-born product. But there are people who love to shape the future of a product. And that's basically the best customer for us, but also the best customer for you. Doesn't matter if you build a car, a new furniture piece, a new computer, a rocket to Mars, or just a new household machine. It doesn't matter what it is. There are always people who are not only willing, but get fascinated to shape a product in its basically infant stage. And this is what we're looking to. And so we built this innovation management platform, or this whole stream, not because we thought, oh, this would be cool, but we could not find anything that is even close to what we needed. There was one company that has sort of an OEM function. And so we thought, okay, we can build it to what we needed, but they weren't quite willing to do all the effort. So we started to do it ourselves. Coming back to my first slide real quick, and then go to question and answers. Corporate innovation on a new path. So the question, how can we become more innovative? I think we can answer your employees that you were wondering, what can we do to make them more creative, more innovative, and more entrepreneurial? They are actually already creative. You have it already without knowing. So consider make the innovation team highly diverse instead of many of the same. That decision will change the course of your innovation. And with this has nothing to do with BlueCallom and with our product. These are kind of things that will change it, right there. And then you don't need to build an early warning system. If you build out your vision out of the whole, neuro ideation process, then this thing can be not copied at all by nobody, not a single person in the world. And if somebody would copy it, guess what? You would be the first and they would be the follower. And you will need follower anyway. You cannot be a market leader if you don't have followers. But with a big vision, you will lead the market before the vision is even produced. And that makes you strong. And this is the same thing what all these innovative builders and leaders actually have done in the past. And then take the methodology approach and bring all the newly created innovation to global markets. That is something we haven't talked about how and why it's so different, but we have a couple more webinars where we want to share this with you. So empower your team to innovate. Every human has ideas, I just said that. And we need to unleash that treasure. We need to go away. That's a political, sort of philosophical aspect. We will need to go away from our classical education system, learn and repeat, learn and repeat, learn and repeat, and be a good citizen and be ready for an enterprise to work and repeat. That is not where humanity probably will end up in the next 100 years or 50 years already. So try to get your ideas out of your team today with the people you have. I mean, you have, I'm 100% sure, just excellent people. So the innovation readiness assessment helps to do that. We have a warming up team webinar, which we did with large enterprises, where we did basically a webinar for them addressing some of their issues. And one of the interesting things is we had with one company, we trained basically 600 managers with basically what I more or less shared with you today. And out of this, there were about 16 people who were interested. That means 590 something or 80 something people were not so interested. But how would anybody find out who are these guys who can't wait, who want to go forward? And so we realized this wasn't our idea, I have to say. I mean, this was the idea of that company. We realized that this is actually marvelous to find out who are key driver for innovation in your business, because many people don't want to change. Many people don't want to learn something new. Many people don't want to expose themselves with new ideas that other people may say it's crazy. So a good idea. And then you select your most talented team and get your own hands dirty on the beta test. We start October 20, so this is a little bit of advertising now. We start on October 20, and it's no advertising because it doesn't cost anything. Well, it probably is. Anyway, so it doesn't cost you anything, and all we're asking for is feedback, as much as you can give us. Help us shape the future of innovation, which is actually your future as well. And so this is all what we're like to get as a return on the beta test. You can keep it at least till February. That is sort of a technical thing where I said, okay, at some point we want to alert you, please go on and buy a license. But I can tell you as CEO of the company, we will not shut you off. And if you need more time, absolutely. I mean, for us, it's important that you're helping us and we will help you as much as we can. And if you needed another year, I wouldn't actually mind. Okay, with that, I want to thank you very much and give it back to Cleo, who moderates the event, and we'll see if we have still a couple of questions.
Yes, so thank you so much, Axel, for the great webinar. We do have a couple of questions, so we'll just go ahead and dive right into those then. So our first question, somebody is asking, is BlueCallom a US company or a European company?
Okay, it's even though, you know, where we came from, the company is registered in Switzerland. We're headquartered in Switzerland right now. We're very active in Southeast Asia, which is for us probably the biggest market of all. We have a team in San Francisco, and so we're kind of, I mean, for us, you know, actually Palo Alto is still our kind of home, but we're living in Switzerland, and so we're kind of a multinational organization, but headquartered in Switzerland.
Okay, our next question. It's a comment/question. We have our own innovation process. Is your software compatible with other innovation workflows?
So I would say yes and no. So what we're working on right now is use our methods and understanding and augment, and this is the first step we're doing, is augment the design thinking model. Probably very well aware. I used it myself many times before I understood how everything works. And so the middle piece, which is the ideation piece, doesn't tell you how to create ideas. And so we use that as a first model and replace basically that middle piece with a Neuro Ideation piece. We're also considering, which is a big market segment, is a couple other methods. I mean, one of them is the, what's it called? Shoot. Yeah, one of those. So yes, for a custom version, I mean, your own process, I mean, technically we were prepared for something like that to do in the next couple of years. So that this question is coming today is a little bit surprising also for us, I have to say. But at one point, we may be able to do that.
Okay, sounds good. We just have another question coming in. How would you respond if internal stakeholders are fearful that adding a tool and the additional structure will take too much resource time or slow things down?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly what we're doing is not just leading, but bleeding edge, meaning there's a lot of new things, and we know what it does, and we know we're feeling okay to give somebody also the opportunity to play with. So we would not want to screw up with you or anybody else. But I would say if the fear is larger, then maybe wait maybe half a year or a year until we're more settled. I mean, I'm totally clear and honest about that. Beta test is beta test, even though we will have our first production version early or mid-January, but also this version is still in an infant stage. So I think this should be a one-to-one conversation, whether this makes sense or not. And trust me, I don't want somebody, using it where there is a, kind of a hard feeling later on. I mean, we both would lose. I mean, therefore, we're interested on early adapters who take the risk and know that there is a risk if there is a very critical innovation project right now and right here. And you have the fear that this may not be the right product or the right time, then I would honestly say wait maybe a half a year or so.
Okay, thank you for that answer. We have another question. So considering that you collect hundreds of ideas, this participant would guess that AI or machine learning is used for retrieving the experiences. Can you clarify?
Okay. So the answer is here and now, we're not ready with the AI version. I mean, we're working on concepts and algorithms, and kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, we're playing actually in a way with our minds that nobody has done before. And we're light years away from having truly an AI system. If you look at an AI system, I don't know whether you've seen, AlphaGo, for instance. This was one of the documentary. Amazing story, absolutely amazing how this system can work. But it can only work so wonderfully because in this case, the rules are, I mean, simply set. There is only one rule in this game. When you look at the automobile industry and look at autonomous driving, also there is nothing for the AI system, nothing is new. Everything that is sort of captured has to be captured somehow, and every conceivable situation is calculated out of the others. So what we're doing is working on ideas that don't actually exist. They cannot be retrieved in the internet, nowhere. And that makes the complexity of an AI system to completely struggle right now. So, but we're trying to find bleeding edge AI people who can help us solve it. But right now, AI is in the making. We will use algorithms to check who is rating what and how it's rated and stuff like that. But I'm too long in this AI business actually to take AI, what it's understood under experts doesn't exist. And so the same is with us.
Do you remember the name of the documentary by any chance? Our participant is curious.
Okay.
You can always follow up.
Yeah, so it's on Netflix. I mean, it's still there, I believe, and it's called AlphaGo. That's the title. And AlphaGo is a project from Google. They bought a British company, whatever the name was, and so the thing is that the best Go player, that board game Go, which is known to be not really up to only intelligent, but actually needs intuition to actually play. And nobody believed that a computer can ever play Go. And this guy actually lost three or four games. And then there's a consecutive thing where AlphaGo Zero, that has never played Go, has never access to even the internet, only the rule, actually created games on its own with the rule they had and played against itself until they understood everything, and then played against AlphaGo, the original version, and won every game. I mean, fantastic story. You have to see it.
I think I know what my plans will be later tonight. So thank you for that recommendation.
Yeah.
So we're just going to check the question box. There are no more questions. So that concludes today's webinar. So we'd like to thank everybody from across the world for joining us in many different time zones. And we invite you to connect with BlueCallom on LinkedIn, Twitter, and on Facebook. And so on behalf of our team here at BlueCallom, thanks again for joining us, and we hope that you have a great rest of your day.
All right. Also from my side, thank you very much, and hope to see you around. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Leo.